He didn't. He was proselytizing. He was.
Did you go into a sukkah?
No. I said I already had plans to go to another sukkah. So, but
that's a great story.
Yeah. So those things travel around though. Those religious symbols are very mobile. It turns out.
What does labile mean? Labile.
I don't know.
I feel like it's something we should know, because mobile is a great word, but then what about labile?
I don't even know that word. I don't think.
Labile means open to change, adaptable, an emotionally labile person. So that's us.
Yeah.
In fact, I remember a lot of people saying about you weren't there, but they said that Monica, she's an emotionally labile person.
Hardly.
A lot of nations won't let the Jews in this Torah portion. I mean, they're traveling around and nobody, even when they say they'll pay for their food and water.
Yeah.
So it's kind of just like before the Holocaust and during the Holocaust, there were nations kicking Jews out and there were nations that wouldn't let Jews in.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, it makes sense that they wouldn't want to let the Jews in because
they're dirty?
Right, because they don't bathe. Nobody wants to let non-bathers in.
Yeah.
I mean, what happened when they left Egypt? That had to have caused Egyptian economy
to
disintegrate, right?
Right.
So nobody wants to deal with that. I mean, it makes sense just from a fiscal perspective. But there's this guy, Moshe, he's causing the ground to open up, people are dying. I wouldn't want that group of people either. I want to live. So I can understand.
Do you notice how many demands that the Torah keeps making on the ger, on the stranger living in the Holy Land? Like, nobody seems to be exempt from Torah demands. Like, even the stranger living within your gates has to observe the Sabbath, has to observe Passover.
That's an interesting point, because that is absolutely not the case now. I mean, some even say, I've even heard it argued that it's transgressive for a non-Jew
to keep the Sabbath.
Right, to keep the Sabbath or to be observant.
But in the land of Israel, there's still a system of law that they're accountable to. So even if they're like illegal aliens, they still have to watch their P's and Q's in some matters. So everybody gets held accountable to law in the Torah. There's no free lunch, no free pass. And I just can't imagine that the Torah would be totally cool with illegal immigration. Like, I know this isn't explicitly in the text, but there's the idea that even the stranger is still accountable to your law. And the stranger just can't choose to, I'm just going to observe those parts that I'm cool with. But there's one law that rules this nation, and it's applicable to those who are Jewish and to those who are strangers.
They can't use the hospital and not pay taxes.
I'm not sure what the exact ramifications are, but I think it's very clear that a society has a right to make demands on everyone who's there, including people who are there illegally, people who are not citizens. Like, everybody has to step up to a certain level of behavior. And it doesn't say anything here, if you had a traumatic childhood, you're exempt. If you belong to historically oppressed people, you're exempt. If you don't feel like it, you're exempt. Like, all the reasons that people use for getting out of their obligations, the Torah doesn't seem to give much.
But I mean, the question is, are we supposed to mirror this, or are we being shown what not to do? I mean, I feel like that's always the question when you're dealing with Torah. Is this an instance of, look what they did here, don't do that, don't model yourselves after this, or after these people, or after this leader? Or is this, are we to take this as indicative of how we should behave?
So how do you answer that? Do you take it as indicative of how we should behave when you agree with something, and then you take it as indicative of how we should not be?
I always think it's a question. It's rare that I will make an absolute, definitive, authoritative statement about something.
That's true. Monica does not make a lot of authoritative statements about how we should behave based on Torah. I've been around Monica for about 6 years, and I haven't seen her go up to people and say, "Hey, you should do X, or you must stop doing Y," because in Torah portion Hukat, you can see very clearly that that's not you. You're not a...
We can rarely see things very clearly in Torah. I mean, there are a few things we can see quite clearly, and there's a lot more ambiguity than anything else. There's a lot more opportunity for competing interpretations. Yes, I'm always very reticent to...
So how does someone who, like you and like me, who came from a Protestant heritage, adjust to such a ritualized text and a ritualized religion? I mean, this is very different from the New Testament, what we're studying here.
But there's still a very ritualistic component to
Protestantism?
the way I grew up. There was.
How so?
It was very strict. We were in church Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night. We did not miss. We simply did not miss. There were things that we didn't do. My particular family, we didn't drink any alcohol. We didn't go to movies. We didn't dance. We didn't gamble. We didn't smoke cigarettes. So that there was a ritual kind of component. So it's not completely unfamiliar to me to come to Judaism and to come to Orthodox Judaism and to understand and even accept some of the more stringent.
So did righteousness by faith play a major role in your upbringing?
Of course, yeah. I mean, it's always about faith first.
You're saved by the faith, but you then express your gratitude
what did Paul say
for God's
in
gift.
Galatians? It is by grace you are saved through faith,
Yeah.
though not of works,
Yeah.
lest any man should boast,
Yeah.
which is completely antithetical to Judaism,
Yeah.
right? Because
Yeah.
Judaism is so much about what you do
Right.
and not what you believe.
And it's a lot about boasting, too. I mean, Jews are much more free to tell you their accomplishments.
Well, we heard that in
on
Prayer
Sunday,
Talk.
yeah. How do you know, how can you tell a Jew from a non-Jew? It's only the Jews that come up and tell you, you a stranger, what college their kids are going to.
Yeah. They're proud, living through their children.
That was a good talk. What did you think of that talk?
There were a lot of things I disagreed with, and I thought he oversimplified a few things, but overall I really enjoyed it.
What were some of the things that you really disagreed with?
I don't know if you saw, but I kept raising my hand trying to ask a question, and I didn't get called on.
What was your question?
My question was going to be, because he was saying that we have a moral obligation to be happy,
to act
right?
happy,
To act happy.
Yeah.
And I see that to a certain degree, but what I wanted to ask him was, do you not think that there's a point at which happiness as a performance becomes a kind of affront to human authenticity? Is there a point at which it kind of breaks down and ceases to be a moral obligation, begins to erode, that human authenticity and become transgressive? Because I think there is a point at which it does. I just wanted to know what he would say, because he was really breaking it down into either or, thinking either you act happy or you don't. You need to act happy all the time.
Well, is there a point when clean breath becomes inauthentic, and you should just
That's funny.
allow yourself to have bad breath even though you're in very close contact with other people?
No.
What about cleanliness and smelling good?
That's a cultural
Because smelling
thing.
good,
That's
smelling
a
good is
cultural
inauthentic.
thing.
Because if you didn't make special efforts to smell
But
good,
no-
you would stink. Not you in particular,
Right.
but
But I don't think anybody's going to say that you have a moral obligation to bathe.
well, I mean, Dennis was. I mean, that was a moral upshot because of your effect on other people.
Right.
You have to constantly keep in mind your effect on other people. So if you are going to be around other people, particularly in any proximity, you need to bathe and make sure you got fresh breath.
Oh, well, I would prefer that, but moral obligation, I don't know. I mean, I suppose it's a cultural thing too.
I mean, you don't like to be around smelly, bad breath people.
I don't. I'm very